Hello, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to all of you listening to me out there. So I can see some of the names. Let me welcome some of you. So, hi, Harshitha, Hanan, Joe, Oditya, Letitia, Abhineet, Subhash, Sohail. How do I pronounce this? Fafafat, I think is the name. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Shubhadarshini, Iyad, Viju. So those are some of the names that I can see, but a very warm welcome to others whose names are not visible at my end but are there. We always worry about reading because it's a very time consuming process. With the focus edition, the timing has been squeezed even more. So, having the right strategies to read on an exam like the GMAT Focus Edition is very, very important. And today we are going to talk about all of that. So, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. This is Sunita, and I will be your host today. I have mentored tons of students, thousands of them, understood their problems while preparing for exams such as GMAT, and I have kind of curated the course trying to address all those problems. I have scored the 99th percentile, the verbal section multiple times. So that's about me. But we are going to talk more and more about reading and comprehension in the session today. What is it that we are going to look at? We are going to look at the importance of reading and comprehension on the focus edition of the GMAT. All right. Just 1 minute on that. And then we are going to talk about why most of the time we falter at reading and comprehension. All right. It's important to understand what exactly is wrong, where exactly do we go wrong. And post that, we're going to talk about improvement strategies. We're going to talk about the time saving irony. People rush through passages to save time, but it's ironical they actually take more time and why that happens. And through all of it, we're going to solve certain number of questions. So I hope you are all ready for this marathon. So good to see more of you joining still now. Oh, one thing that I did not ask, but perhaps it's a little late in the day. Do let me know if all of y'all can hear me loud and clear. Okay, great. All of you can hear me. All right. So, first things first, the GMAT Focus Edition Verbal, I'm sure a lot of you know about it. If you're preparing for the classic version, no issues. In the classic version, the importance of RCs is quite high, but in GMAT Focus Edition, it's even higher. So let's understand that how. See, in the GMAT Focus Edition Verbal, you just have RC and CR. You don't have sentence correction. 23 questions in 45 minutes means just under 2 minutes for each question. And here, because you don't have sentence correction to save time for you, you really don't have more time than that. And in this case, therefore, the approach, the strategy that you adopt on these RCs and CRs is going to be very, very important. In terms of weightage, you can expect to find anything between 13 to 14 RC questions. What I have been hearing of from students giving the focus edition lately is about 4 passages with 3 questions each. All right, maybe one of the passages with 4 questions, and then the rest of the questions come from CR. So more weightage is given to RC than to CR. That's the focus edition for you. What's the common fear factor? Why do we falter at RC? And here you guys can help me. Can you answer in the chat box some reasons why you are scared of RCs? Go ahead, quickly. Some reasons why RCs scare you, or some reasons why you believe you don't do well in RCs. Let's hear about your fear factors so that I can sum all of that up. Go ahead. Okay, Letitia is saying too much text, unable to understand what it is really about. Granted, yes, you have to read a lot of information in very short time, and therefore there's always the difficulty to process all of it correctly. What else? Come on, please help me here. I can always tell you what are my fear factors, but I want to listen from you. What are you scared of? Pranjal believes lack of practice. Well, Pranjal, that's a rhetorical complaint. Lack of practice means practice more. But are you practicing in the right manner? Avik says multiple ideas, difficult to perceive, almost what Letitia said. What about the others? There are so many of you out there, guys. Do speak up. Rituparna says passages are too long, complex, boring, lose concentration while reading. Absolutely. I sympathize. I empathize, Rituparna. Uh, Pafafat says you understand the passage but still get the wrong answer. So, Papafat, what could be happening is you get a broad understanding of the passage, but when it comes to the nitty gritty, the details, that is something that you're not capturing, and therefore you're getting the answer wrong. Walid says the vocab is bad. Walid, if vocabulary is a problem, you definitely have to build a good vocabulary. However, GMAT passages are structured not to test your vocabulary. So if any, let's say, difficult, so-called difficult words come up, the context will always help you understand the meaning. Anubhav says most of the time when there's a hard level passage, it becomes difficult to understand every line. We are going to look at one such hard paragraph, Anubhav, today. All right, so I hope I can help you there. And hence, I keep repeating the same sentence. Now, this is a very, very common complaint. Rereading the same sentence again and again without really comprehending in the first read, and therefore costing you time. In fact, today's reading strategy is all about reading in such a manner so that you can avoid the rereading. Viju finds his choices close. Aditya finds it very difficult to draw inferences. Okay. Janavi says getting the main point. Okay, Janavi, I have webinars on how to get the main point. So I'm sure you should watch that. You can just you can look for me on YouTube. Just search for Sunita Singhvi, GMAT Wiz, and main point. Abhineet also says too much information to process. So, guys, I think the common fear factor, which if I summarize all of it, is basically poor recall. So you have too much of information means you cannot recall all of that properly. Sometimes the topics are unfamiliar, close answer choices, and all of this takes time. So because you think all of this, there is a mental block in each of your minds that RC is difficult. All right. And because there of this mental block, you try different approaches. I have known students tell me, okay, I just scan and skim through the passage, and then when I look at the questions, I go back to the passage again and again to search for the answer. So this person probably lands up rereading the same passage multiple times. Then there is this method which says, okay, read the first and last line of each paragraph, scan the rest, okay, and then reread again when you're answering questions. Then there's this strategy where they say that, okay, you should concentrate on some keywords in each paragraph and then just scan through the rest of it. Don't pay attention much. And then there's this another strategy which says, okay, read the question first and then go and read the passage and search for the answer. Do any of these work? I have tried personally all these and many more and saw that they don't work. Why they don't work? We'll come to that. But what happens is these strategies, instead of saving me time and increasing my accuracy, actually take me a lot more time because I'm rereading so many times. And often because I'm rereading so many times, I'm confusing my brain even more and I compromise my accuracy. So what we need is precise understanding of the passage, not just an overview, not just a broad view, but a proper, accurate understanding of the passage. How to do it, we're going to talk about that. So here's a passage for all of you, okay? I want you to read this paragraph and answer that question. Then I'm going to show you how to read in the involved and evolved manner so that you don't have to reread You don't have to go back to the passage again and again, and you can answer the most difficult of all questions. So, how much time should I give you for that one question and that one paragraph? Yes, all of you, you can bid for time. You can tell me how much time I should give you, and then I'll take a decision. So, I've got about 50 of you here, roughly. Yes, do tell me how much time you think I should give you guys to read that paragraph and solve that one question. Pranjal says 2 minutes. Pranjal, in 2 minutes, you won't be able to do anything. If I had to read this passage and answer that one question, I would definitely take at least 4 to 5 minutes. Okay, so I have 2, 5, 3, 3, 3, 6, 3. I'm going to do an average and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, not even 4. 5 minutes, your time starts now. Okay, remember in the exam, if you spend some time reading this passage and then to solve this question in 5 minutes, you would have more questions. So go ahead. 5 minutes, your time starts now. I'll mute myself and I'll bring up the poll. Those of you who've just joined us, there's another 1 minute 20, sorry, 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes 20 seconds left. I gave you 5 minutes, so go ahead. 20 seconds left. Please start putting in your answers because I am going to then end the polls. 20 seconds left. 15 seconds left. All right, 5 minutes up. I'm going to count 5 and I will end the polls. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, let's take a look at the result. The result speaks for itself how hard all of you found this question, because no one question has a huge majority over the others. No one option, sorry. So 21% believe A is the correct answer, 26% believe B is the correct answer, 15% each for C and D, and 21% again for E. And most of you have got this question wrong. So let's see why. Now, the issue is not so much as, you didn't have time, because I gave you 5 minutes, right? 4 whole minutes to read this one paragraph. So you could have used all the strategies that we're going to talk about to read this paragraph. But did you use them? Probably not. Let's see how to read this passage best. For the time being, guys, I would request you to not constantly think of time, but to look at the strategy closely. See how I am breaking the sentence to read. All right. See where I break, what I think, how I connect, how I keep relating back to the previous sentences. Watch what I do. All right. So I am now going to get into the involved reading methodology. But before that, I'm sure some of you did think these. You thought, oh my God, the language is so dense. I didn't understand anything. I understood something, but I didn't understand all of it. Yet I continued reading forward. I just had a rough understanding of the paragraph, something about royalists, patriarchalism, feminists, conflicts, and God knows what not. All right. I was confused between two choices. I ended up rereading parts of the paragraph again and again to find the answer. I'm sure all of you went through one or more of these thoughts. All right. So let's see how to tackle that best. Now, a couple of things, heads up. Any given paragraph on the GMAT RCs would contain 3 to 4 sentences. Some rare cases 5. For example, look at the construction of this paragraph. One sentence 1 starts here, ends here. Look at the length of that sentence. Second sentence starts here, and God help me ends here. Look at this. This is the length and breadth of this second sentence. Okay? You cannot expect to understand that sentence properly if you don't read it in the right way. And then the last sentence actually starts here and ends here. Only 3 sentences. But the sentences are complex sentences with lots of modifiers thrown in, lots of relative pronoun clauses thrown in, lots of breaks thrown in. So it's very important that you break and read the sentence. So I'm going to show you how I read the first sentence. All right. It is an odd but indisputable fact. I would stop here and I would say, okay, what is this say? What is this segment saying? Who is saying it? And why is it being said? So it seems to be an opinion. And since nobody's name is given here, it seems the author finds something odd, but doesn't argue about it. Okay, so the fact is now going to be pointed out here. The fact which the author finds odd. 17th century English women. Now, I would always find some short form to refer to these long descriptions, So let's call them 17W or 17EW or whatever way you want to refer to. Who are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. This is a modifier. for these 17 EW. All right. So who are these 17 EW? They are forerunners of modern feminism, which means they are probably the early feminists, the beginners of feminism. Okay, so that's a modifier for them. Are almost all identified. Now, what is the subject of this R? The subject of this R is this 17 EW. So all these 17 EW are all identified with the royalist side. That means they are associated, they belong to the royalist side in the conflict between royalists and parliamentarians known as the English Civil Wars. So that's how I will complete reading my sentence. And from this sentence, if I am making notes, which is not necessary, not compulsory, but just to clear my head, just to have the idea clear, I would say, okay, we are talking about English Civil Wars in which I have two sides. I have the royalists and I have the parliamentarians, all right? And all these 17th century women come from the royalist side, none from the parliamentarians. And this is something that the author finds odd but true. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is my first sentence. Okay, let me know if this process is clear to all of you, and let me know if you find it useful. Just a minute, just give me 1 minute, guys. Let me know if the explanation is clear so far. And do comment if you find this process useful. Do comment in the chat box if you find this process helpful. It's a simple process for a single sentence. You just have to repeat it for all sentences. But basically what I have done is I have broken down the sentence into small portions so that I understand every portion. I have a very crystal clear understanding of that first line. So some of you are saying the explanation is not clear. Please put your queries in the chat box. I will be glad to answer you. What is not clear? Please let me know. I will answer you. 8% of you are saying the explanation is not clear. So please let me know your queries. I'd love to help you. Yes, I'm waiting, guys. What are your doubts? We are talking about English civil wars. We are talking about two parties in English civil wars, the royalists, which is represented by R, the parliamentarians, which is represented by P, and the author is saying all the 17th century early feminist English women, they all came from the royalist side, and the author finds it odd but true. I'll put up the poll again. Please let me know if the explanation is clear. Hold on a second. Only Subhadarshini found it helpful. Anyways, thank you, Subhadarshini. No issues. All right. So this is how we are going to get involved in reading the sentences. So I'm just going to summarize this understanding here for all of you to understand. That's the first sentence. Author finds a fact odd but true. Okay. Now, so let's clear this up. Now I'm going to start with the second sentence. Since. Now, since is one of those transition words. We call these words transition words: since, although, because, and words like this, because they add or they show a shift in the view that is being presented. So since here, since royalist ideology is often associated with, so that the author is saying because royalist belief is often related with the radical patriarchalism of 17th century political theorist Robert Filmer. So this guy belongs to the same time frame, 17th century. So let me shorten this sentence. Because royalist ideology is associated with patriarchalism of, all right, Filmer. Because of this, now this part I am not reading right now. I'll come back to it because it is placed within the dashes. I'll read it later. But right now I'm continuing from before the dash. Since royalist ideology is associated with patriarchalism of Filmer, because of that, historians have been understandably puzzled. So we're talking about another puzzle. What puzzle? By the fact that royalist women wrote extended criticism of absolute subordination of women in marriage and earliest systematic assertions of women's rational and moral equality with men. So we are saying that because royalist ideology was all about patriarchalism, that is why historians are puzzled that these royalist women, they wrote against patriarchalism. If they are writing against absolute subordination of women, that's writing against patriarchalism. How do we know that? Let's read what is given between the dashes. Patriarchalism equates family and kingdom. So patriarchalism says, okay, family is equal to kingdom, asserts divinely ordained absolute power of the king, and by analogy means by comparison of the male head of the family. So male head, okay, equals to king, and both are equally powerful. So this is patriarchalism, and the royalist women, they wrote against this, right? Against Filmer's belief. So this is what puzzled historians, that royalist women should follow the royalist ideology. They should also believe in the absolute power of the male. But why are they questioning? Why are they criticizing the subordination of women? Right? So we can summarize this by saying that, okay, the author is telling us the views of some historians, and the author is telling us historians are puzzled that women who belong to this royalist ideology, they criticized male power. Okay, so look at how I have simplified my understanding of the sentence. Because Filmer's ideology observed absolute male power, historians are puzzled that women criticize the male power. Okay, let me know if the explanation is clear. I'm just going to bring up the poll again. Is the explanation clear? And I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all did not get this kind of crystal clear understanding when you read the passage first. Okay, fine. So I've read the long sentence, done. And I see this long thing I have just summarized in this understanding. Okay, let me read the last sentence now. Some historians have questioned the equation of royalist ideology with Filmerian patriarchalism. So here we are talking about royalist ideology being equal to Filmerian patriarchalism. Now the author is saying some historians don't believe in this equation. Okay. And indeed, so the author also is kind of supporting the fact that maybe the royalist ideology is not the same as Filmerian patriarchalism. And indeed, there may have been no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on the issue of family organization and women's political rights. Okay, so the author believes it is possible that royalists and parliamentarians believed in the same ideology. Okay, it's not just that royalists believed in patriarchalism. Now, this but is very important. But in that case means if royalists and patriarchalism parliamentarians had no differences, then in that case, one would expect early feminists, that means the 17th century English women, to be equally divided between the two sides. That means this is what the author found odd, right? That they are all coming from the royalist side. And author ends by saying that this is what puzzles him or her. So some historians doubt that the royalists followed Filmer's ideology. Author supports this and says maybe the royalists and parliamentarians followed the same ideology. And the author now rounds up and says very clearly that if there had been no differences between royalists and parliamentarian ideas on women and family, then half of the women feminists should have come from the parliamentarian side as well. But actually, they all came from the royalist side, and that is what the author finds odd. So the summary of this paragraph is, given the background on the ideologies of two sides, it is odd that all 17th century English women who were early feminists were royalists and none were parliamentarians. This is the odd part. Okay, now let's answer the question. So the question was, why was Filmer mentioned, right? The question is, why was Filmer mentioned? Why was Filmer mentioned? Now, Filmer was mentioned to talk about patriarchalism, right? Let's do the pre-thinking. Filmer was mentioned to introduce patriarchalism. Patriarchalism was mentioned to tell us that this was the ideology that royalists held. The ideology that royalists held was mentioned to tell us how the royalists believed in the absolute power of the male king. And absolute power of the male king was mentioned to tell us that royalist women wrote against the male power, which means Filmer was mentioned to tell us that royalist women wrote against patriarchalism. So Filmer was mentioned to show the contrast. Okay? Contrast was between royalists and royalist women. So the purpose of referring to Filmer was to show that belief of the royalist women were in contrast to the royalist ideology. All right? That's the purpose why Filmer was mentioned. So let me know if this is clear. Is it clear how we arrived at the answer? Why was Filmer mentioned? Okay, to introduce patriarchalism. Why was patriarchalism mentioned? To talk about royalist ideology. Why was royalist ideology mentioned? To tell us how the royalist women were against that ideology. Good. So now if we have to choose the correct answer. All right, 21% of you have chosen A. A says the purpose of mentioning Filmer was to show that royalist ideology was more radical. No. Ask yourself, does the author here, ask yourselves, is the author's intention to merely indicate that royalist ideology was more radical? No. The pre-thinking, the purpose is to focus our attention on the contrast, not to just tell us it was more radical or less radical. So A is out. Qualify. Now, what does the word qualify mean? A lot of you have marked this as the answer, 26% of you. Qualify means to limit the strength of something, to limit the meaning of a statement. Ask yourself, does the author want to limit the strength or meaning of any claim? Is the author trying to limit the claim? No. General claim is royalists followed Filmer's ideology. The author is not disputing that as such. That is not the purpose of mentioning Filmer. So this is also a distortion. We are just using words from there. We are using the word patriarchalism, we are using the word royalist ideology, and we are constructing an answer. But the purpose of the author is not to restrict the meaning of that claim. Question the view that most early feminists were associated with royalist faction. The author says it is indisputable fact, right? Question means to raise doubt. Ask yourself, is the author doubting the fact that early feminists were all royalists? No, that part the author says is an indisputable fact. So author is not questioning that fact. Okay, this is the opposite of the premise. So this is out. See how I'm categorizing the wrong answers, why they're wrong. One is out of scope, the other is actually going against the premise. Highlight means focus. So highlight means focus. Stark contrast means apparent tension between royalist ideology and royalist feminists, between royalist ideology and ideas of early feminists. So this is per our pre-thinking, and this is the correct answer. The answer choices will obviously not be written exactly in the way you have thought about it, but you have to match it. E, again, 21% of you mark this as the answer. And here again, the author is saying that maybe there was no consistent differences, or maybe there was. That is the meaning of the word maybe. So the author is not arguing that royalists had different conflicting opinions. All right, the author believes maybe the royalists and the parliamentarians had similar opinions. And within the royalists, maybe they also had similar opinions. But that was not why the Filmer was mentioned. Filmer was mentioned to show a stark contrast between patriarchalism that was followed by royalists and what the female royalist women, the females of the royalist household wrote. So E is also just a distortion of words used in the paragraph, but not the correct answer. So the key difference in the way I was reading was, instead of focusing on reading speed, I was focusing on my comprehension speed. And as a result, I had a better understanding of the passage. So involved and evolved reading means to think like the author, ask yourself what the author is trying to tell you. All right, break the sentences into small chunks, derive the meaning of that small chunk, and that is how you understand the meaning of the full sentence. You try to understand, okay, what is the sentence saying? Who is saying that? And why is it being given to you as a piece of information? For every subsequent sentence, you try to relate back to the previous sentence. And for this, you can try to take help of transition words and conjunctions to understand how you can connect one sentence to the other, how you can correlate. And in this manner, you try to keep summarizing what you're reading so that you can summarize each paragraph and then finally summarize the passage as well. So do let me know if the process, this involved and evolved reading, the basic process is clear to all of you. I know what most of you are thinking, that it will take a lot of time, but any new skill that you learn, initially it takes a lot of time, but as you become better at it, the time gets reduced more and more. So you have to practice this. At least 15 to 20 days of good practice will put you in a very, very good situation. Okay, so in order to build the right reading and comprehension skills at GMAT-Wiz, we teach you everything in small steps. Like you saw that I was pausing at certain places and reading. So we tell you where to pause. You saw that how I understood the meaning of patriarchalism by looking at the context. So we teach you how to take care of complex words. We tell you how to make note of what is a fact and what is an opinion. We also tell you how to notice that the author's opinion is different from the third party opinions, and therefore finally to understand the intent of the passage. And for this, just to teach you the skill, we spend more than 10 hours. All right, this is a screenshot from our the view of our course, and we make sure that this is a very, very important part of your learning. All right, here's the second passage, two short paragraphs. I'm again going to give you 5 minutes because this is not a very difficult passage, but I want you guys to try the involved reading at least. Okay, so 5 minutes, your time starts now. 30 seconds left. Please mark your answers if you haven't done that already. Okay, I will count 5 and close the polls. Please make sure your answers are in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. By the way, I have posted 2 links in the chat box for all of you. If you are interested in looking at the free trial version of our course, I've posted a link for you to um, look at that version. And if you want to talk to our strategy experts, if you want to discuss your issues, your problems with them, then I have also given you a link to calendly.com. You can book a free call with our strategy experts to do that. Okay, so let's see what the poll results say. 41% of you believe A is the correct answer. 33% of you believe B is the correct answer. 8% believe in C and 16% believe it's E. So again, this passage was not as difficult as the first one, but it is still in the medium hard category because you can see how A and B are closely competing with one another, with each other. All right. So let's see, is it A or is it B or is it C or E? So I'm going to get started here with the process of involved and evolved reading. By the way, how many of you all tried the involved and evolved reading? Yes? If you tried the involved and evolved reading, you can mark yes in the poll. If you did not really try it or if you were not able to try it, mark no. I'm just talking about trying it. I don't care. I mean, I'm not asking whether you were like, you found success in answering the question or not, but did you try it? Because it is something that you have to keep trying, keep processing, keep trying till you get the hang of it. Okay, good to know that a good 60% of you tried it or were able to try it. Keep trying it, guys. This works. Okay, let me get started with my analysis. To put things simply, okay, so the author wants to simplify something. Induction emphasizes the individual. If you don't know what is induction, be patient. The context ahead will explain that word to you. For now, just focus on the, okay, induction means it is some term, something emphasizes, stresses on, emphasizes means stresses on, the individual means the person, individual person, single person. Whereas here is a transition word, it's showing us a contrast that the author is going to produce. Deduction begins with generalization. Okay, so the author is pitching 2 things, induction versus deduction. Induction is focusing on individual, deduction is looking at the general picture. All right, we don't know why the author is telling us this right now. Science largely began with a focus on deduction. Okay, so now the author is singling out deduction for discussion. The author is telling us science began with deduction, not with induction. So maybe this author is going to give us more differences between induction and deduction. Trying to find universal laws and hoping to explain as much about the world as possible. So this is what science was trying to do. And in trying to do this, science was focusing on generalizations. All right. In the 19th century, so from the beginning of science, now we have come to a different date, a later date. In the 19th century, generalizations means deduction, reached a pinnacle of overuse. Okay, so generalization was overused by the time the 19th century came, particularly for explaining human characteristics. So generalizations were used particularly for this. Remember, Science was trying to explain things, so maybe science was also trying to explain human characteristics. While, another transition word, deduction became disfavored because of those missteps. So remember, generalization was overused. So because of this, deduction lost favor. Induction rose to favor on the heels of more quantitative techniques. Maybe induction had better techniques for describing the individual objects. So this paragraph, all in all, introduces two terms, tells us the differences between the two terms, tells us how one term lost favor and the other term gained favor. So in short, author talks about two terms and shows how one lost favor over the other. That's it. Short, simple passage, but your understanding must be crystal clear. Your ability to correlate here must be very, very clear. Let's go to the next paragraph. The problem of induction. Hold on. In the first paragraph, the author has already told us that induction was disfavored because it was overused. Now the author is telling us, okay, induction itself wasn't without problems. There was a problem with induction as well. What was the problem? Let's see. The problem of induction is the impossibility of observing every individual case. In other words, so the author is going to explain what he or she means. There is always uncertainty about what hasn't been directly observed, and it is impossible to observe everything. So in my head, I'm saying, all right, let's say we have 1,000 cases, and what the author is saying is we cannot observe all cases. So let's say we can observe 700 cases or whatever number, and we cannot observe, let's say, the remaining 300. All right. And there will always be doubt about what you cannot directly observe. That is what the author is saying. So it has to be very crystal clear in your head what the author is trying to say. So to fill the gap, that means to fill this gap, all right, this gap between observations, we make generalizations. Okay, so the problem of induction is it is also using generalization. Okay, so generalizations are based on what has been observed. So this has been observed, and we draw generalizations from what has been observed, and these generalizations are then used to fill this gap. Okay, now see how crystal clear the understanding is of the process. In modern science, these generalizations take the form of scientific models. So this becomes the scientific model. That means scientific model is partly based on induction and partly based on deduction. And then the passage goes on to tell us that there are different types of models. Most popular model is empirical model. Empirical means it is built from or based on observed data. So empirical means built on observed data. Purpose of this model is to help researcher understand system dynamics and make predictions. So you make predictions based on these scientific models. So the application which is making predictions, this is known as deduction. So basically, induction also relies on deduction to work. And that is the problem with induction. Is this clear? Let me know if the understanding is crystal clear. Oftentimes, if I cannot understand the meaning of a sentence, I make sure I categorize my data very clearly so that I don't have to reread the passage. Again, I'm saying you don't have to always make notes. But in order to have things clear in your picture, if you need to note down your understanding, do it quickly along with the flow of the passage, flow of the reading, not distracting yourself, not writing too many things, just using symbols and arrows. I have written actually a little more than I would do, just for your understanding. So this paragraph basically talks about the problem with induction. That's the summary of this paragraph. That induction has its fair share of problem. Okay, to cover the gap left by induction, we use generalization, and that's the problem. So if I summarize the entire paragraph, this paragraph, the paragraph talks about the problem of induction and how induction helps to generalize, how induction and deduction together are to be used to develop scientific models. So flow of the passages, author first introduces two terms, then the author says one term lost, one of those things lost favor, the other gained favor, and then the author describes the process of induction and the problem that it has. So this is my entire picture. Now the question was, what is the problem of induction? So problem of induction is cannot observe each case, okay, but conclusion must be drawn about the cases, even if you can't observe all cases. All right. So what you do is, to cover the gap, generalization must be drawn. So the problem with induction is ultimately that generalization must be drawn. Okay, that's the problem. So with that pre-thinking, if we now look at answer choices, 41% of you marked A. A is not the answer. Why not? It refers to induction. Induction fails in its observation of individual cases. Now, this says induction cannot observe all cases. It is not the same as saying it fails in the observation. It cannot observe all cases does not mean it fails in its observation. It is not possible to make observation about each case has been distorted into saying that it fails to make observations. Okay? And has to depend on speculative measures to fill gaps. This is not speculative measures. They are focusing on observed data to fill gaps, right? Observed data, then generalization based on those data, and then filling the gap. So speculative means guesses. They are not exactly guessing. So this word speculative is wrong, and the word failure is too harsh. Therefore, A is incorrect. Let me know if this is clear to all of you. Please let me know if A is clear, why it's wrong. Because so many of you marked A as the correct answer. Let me know if the explanation for A is clear, why it is incorrect. The paragraph is not saying it fails to observe. It just says it cannot observe all data. But whatever it is observing, we are using that to draw generalizations. So the correct answer is B, which 33% of you marked. This, in fact, this passage is a GMAT whiz passage. This is not an official passage. The first one was an official passage, but this is a sample of the kind of quality questions that we at GMAT whiz make. You can see how close the two options are and how people get misled. Pretty much what you would find in the actual OG questions. Its advantage is its basis, which are the specific observations. So this choice starts by talking about the advantage of induction. However, look at this. But it too has to resort to generalization. That is what we wanted to know, and that is in line with our pre-thinking. That induction also has to fall back on generalizations to work. So B is the correct answer. It cannot draw up the predictive model is wrong. It does draw up the predictive model even without studying all individual cases, right? So this part, unless and until it has studied all individual cases, this is wrong. Even without studying all cases, observations, generalizations are drawn from the observed cases and the predictive models are drawn. So this is opposite to what the passage is saying. 8% of you marked this, and this is what the passage is not saying. Nobody marked D, and D is not the answer. All observations are built on imprecise observation, wrong. Only those observations which they cannot be observed individually. ultimately used for making general prediction. This is the function of deduction. This is not the problem of induction. Okay. Remember, we are saying that generalizations help to fill the gap, and then the generalizations help us to form predictive models. So this is not the problem of induction, but this is the outcome of induction and deduction together. So I know a lot of y'all are thinking that it's going to be time consuming, but as I said earlier, with practice, the process will become second nature. You will be able to map the passage and understand the flow of idea, and therefore derive the author's point. Some of you were saying that you find it very difficult to understand the main point. So trust me, this is the road to solving all your problems with with RCs. Here's another passage. Go ahead, give this a good shot. So now I've just given the passage. I haven't given the question that you have to answer. I want you to read the passage and kind of write down your own notes or summaries for each of this. Then I'm going to bring up the question. Okay? Go ahead. So I'm going to give you, again, I'll give you 4 minutes to read this passage instead of 5 minutes, because 1 minute I'm going to reserve for the question that I'll bring up later. 4 minutes, your time starts now. Okay, 4 minutes are up. So I'm now going to bring up the question as well that you have to answer. Go ahead, that's the question. You have 1 minute to answer the question. Your time starts now. Time is up. 1 minute is up. So please start putting in your answers. I'm going to count 10 and I'm going to close the polls. So please put in your answers. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is an official passage from the OGs. One of the harder questions, but let's see. Okay, great. How many of y'all, this time I did not give you the question, so there was no distraction of the question for you. How many of y'all, again, I'll ask this question, how many of y'all tried the involved and evolved reading here? Because the question was not there, you had to anyways spend the time on the passage. How many of y'all tried the involved and evolved reading? Again, let me bring up the poll. So please answer that question if you can. How many of y'all use the involved and evolved reading? This time, the poll shows that all of you tried the involved and evolved reading. And let's see if, because all of you followed the involved and evolved reading, did more of you get this question right or not? Let's see that. Okay. So let's get started. Antonia Castaneda, so we're talking about somebody, let's use the short form AC, has utilized scholarship from women's studies and Mexican American history. So these are the two sources that this AC has used to examine 19th century literary portrayals of Mexican women. So the first sentence sets up the introduction of the passage. It says, the author tells us what was it that AC was studying. AC was studying how Mexican women were shown in literature in the 19th century. And the rest of the passage goes on to talk about what are the findings of AC. So the second sentence, which starts from here and ends here, tells us that AC notes that scholars of women's history, remember she was studying women's study and American history, observe that in the US, male novelists, so remember she's trying to see the literary portrayal of Mexican women, and here AC finds how the male novelists of the period portrayed women. So if we focus on this second sentence, male novelists of the period define women solely in their domestic roles of mother and wife. So here we are not talking about Mexican women, mind it, it's women in general, correct? And then the description of this period is given here. The description tells us that that was a period of the industrial economy, All right, that was a period which saw women's uh, economic role in home-based agriculture being pushed back in the face of the factory-based economy. So factory-based economy somehow pushed women's economic role into insignificance. And that is why the male novelists define women solely in the domestic roles. This is what AC notes about scholars of that time. Okay. And then the last line tells us what AC finds out about non Hispanic women and Hispanic women. Okay, how do we know what is non Hispanic and Hispanic? Hold on. If you read further, it says Hispanic law protected economic position of Californianas. And who are Californianas? They are Mexican women, which means Hispanic means Mexican and non-Hispanic means non-Mexican. All right. So what we now learn is the non-Mexican women lost their, economic significance, but the Mexican women, their economic position was safeguarded. And all this is about the reality. This is not about what the novels are saying. All right. So this is the difference that AC notes between Mexican and non-Mexican women during the 19th century US. So summary of this paragraph is telling us AC wanted to understand how Mexican women were portrayed in the 19th century literature. And here she is also explaining one difference between the Mexican women and the non-Mexican women of that time. So we haven't really gotten down to the literary portrayal of Mexican women in this paragraph. But let's move ahead. For Castaneda, the laws, which laws? The Hispanic, the Mexican laws, explain a stereotypical plot. Stereotypical plot means typical plot. Okay? Typical means general plot, something commonly found. And these plots were written by the non-Mexican novelists. What was the plot? The plot was an ambitious non-Mexican merchant desirous of marrying elite Californiana, means the rich Mexican woman. All right. So that's the plot. AC believes the Hispanic law explains why the non-Hispanic authors created a typical plot. They wrote a plot where this money-seeking, fortune-seeking, ambitious non-Mexican men wanted to marry the rich Hispanic women of California. All right, that's the idea here. Long sentence, break it up, and then you'll understand. The author then tells us these novels' favorable portrayal of such women is noteworthy. Why is the author telling you it is noteworthy? This is what you have to understand. So the author tells us it is noteworthy because generally unflattering depictions of Mexicans were present in literature. Why they were present in literature? There was this Mexican-American war going on, and in order to get the support of the US public, the Mexicans were shown in an unflattering manner. But these Californianas were shown in a favorable manner, and that's noteworthy. Okay? That's a paradox here. Other Mexicans shown unflatteringly, Californianas shown favorably. Importance of economic alliances forged through marriages with Californianas explains this apparent contradiction. What is the apparent contradiction? So the contradiction is Californianas or Mexican women are shown in good light, but common Mexicans are shown in bad light. That's the contradiction. And the reason behind the contradiction is the marriages that were forged between these rich Mexican women and the non-Mexican men. And that is why these women were shown favorably in novels. So the summary is AC finds out the reason why Mexican women of that time were portrayed favorably in the novels. Okay, so let's go to the question. What's the apparent contradiction? Per our pre-thinking, the contradiction is favorable portrayal of Californianas, unfavorable portrayal of Mexicans, right? Again, the last line. Californianas were portrayed more favorably than others of the same nationality, which is there indeed. Literary depiction of elite Californianas, yes, versus literary depiction of other Mexican individuals, and that is why D is the answer. This time, 75% of you got it right, which just goes to show that if you try involved and evolved reading genuinely with regular practice, you will get better. This is a hard question, not an easy question. 12% of you, so I'm just going to discuss the other questions also, other options also. The contradiction is not between legal status of Mexican women versus their status in US. This is out. Unflattering depiction of Mexicans in novels. This is correct. Versus public sentiment. No. Existence of marriages between Californianas versus strictures. This isn't even mentioned anywhere. Where is it mentioned that there were strictures against the Mexican women in the novel? All right, the Mexican women, the Californianas, were portrayed favorably. There was no strictures against them. So C is out. Novelistic portrayals of Californianas. The passage doesn't talk about portrayals of privileged lives, actual circumstances of those lives. This is also wrong. So the correct answer is, again, majority of you got that right. Guys, it's important to understand how the answer choices create traps for you. Okay, reading the passage properly is one part of it. Also recognizing what traps. For example, if you go back in the middle of the like you finish reading the passage, and then if you go back and reread some portions of the passage, you will not be able to get the global inference. You will just get the local inference, and you might get the question wrong. You might get the option wrong because you just focused on that small portion of the passage when you went back to search for the answer. So reading in the involved and evolved manner helps you to avoid this trap. There are other traps as well. So at GMAT-Wiz, we categorize them in this manner, we call them distortion and half-truth, confusing words, limited scope, opposite to the premise, out of scope. Different traps are there. And knowing which trap you are marking more over the others helps you to understand your own problem, right? So learning about the trap, knowing how to avoid them, bucketing them properly, is very important. All right. So one of our students, Akshat, improved from 650 to 730 in just 24 days by just focusing on his RC methodology, understanding, even if he was getting a question correct, he would review the solution, all right, the detailed solutions that we provide to understand whether he was getting the question right for the right reason. He kept bucketing his incorrect answers in different categories to see what was he marking most regularly. And then he would revisit those areas to improve the understanding. Moreover, you have to believe in the process. You have to believe in yourself, right? You can't keep doubting yourself. How you learn about these traps, we teach you in our answer choice elimination process. Okay. I did say I would discuss the time-saving ironing, guys, and I'm sure that is playing on your mind all the time. See, most students, what they do is they quickly read the passage in the first read, just like 2-3 minutes, quickly. And what happens is, therefore, they get a broad understanding, a rough idea of what is there in the passage. I won't say that you don't get any understanding, but you don't get a crystal clear understanding. You get a rough understanding. And then when you go to the question, you have to reread the passage again. So you land up spending time over the question. You spend 2 minutes per question. So eventually you're spending about 9 to 11 minutes for a 4-question passage. All right. On the other hand, a GMAT-Wiz student would actually spend more time to read the passage in the first read, almost double the time that others would spend on the passage. But what happens is you get a crystal clear understanding, which means eliminating the choices takes hardly any time, under a minute. And therefore, this person would save time. 2 to 3 minutes would be saved on a passage. And that's saying a lot. If you're saving 2 to 3 minutes on a passage, you're saving time for one full question. So if you rush, it doesn't save time. That's the irony. I hope you found the webinar helpful. Your feedback would be really valuable. And I'm just going to direct your attention to the 2 links that I posted last. The link to the free trial version of the course and the link to set up a free call with our strategy experts to discuss your issues, your problems. So yes, any feedback, do let me know. If you found this webinar helpful, and what kind of topics you'd like to see in future. Do let me know how many of y'all are taking the exam, when are you taking the exam, which one are you taking? Are you taking the focus version? Are you taking the classic version? And above all, I would like to thank all of you for taking time out to attend the webinar. So yes, guys, how many of you found the webinar helpful, informative? You found the process doable, undoable? Any feedback would be helpful, would help us improve our delivery. Okay, so I don't see any questions, if you have any questions related to your verbal prep, you can ask. To RCs, you can ask. And you can reach out to us on that mail ID and on that contact. Thank you, Iyad. Okay. All right. So KP, you can write to support@gmatwiz.com. All right, and get the link from them. They keep the link. They generally post the link. All right, to these webinars. So you can just write to support@gmatwiz.com, KP, and they will. Yes, KP, GMAT Classic Edition is going to be permanently discontinued post 31st January. 31st January is the last date till when you can give the Classic Edition. Post that, you will have to give the Focus Edition. So KP, if you want to look at earlier webinars, what you can do is you can just go to YouTube, type GMAT Sunita Verbal, and I think you should be able to get all the webinars there. They're all out there on YouTube. All right. But you can also alternatively write to support@gmatwiz.com and ask them to provide you with links to earlier webinars on verbal. They can do that. Well, round three in US business schools is always a dicey decision. All right, seats have already been occupied in round one and round two, so number of seats left for decisions is very, very low. All right, but you can, yes, you can still apply. Go ahead if you have made up your mind, if you're able to get that score. KP, you're not able to hear me? Can you hear me now? Guys, can you hear me clearly? Am I audible? So KP, your first query was the recording for today's session. Please write to GMATWiz. You can also get other recordings from support@gmatwiz.com. Alternatively, you can go to YouTube and you can find my webinar recordings there also. And yes, GMAT Classic Edition, the last date of giving it is 31st January. Post that, you cannot give it. It is permanently discontinued. You will have to write the Focus Edition thereafter. And applying in the third round is always, the chances are lower, all right? So I just take the verbal sessions. So yes, YouTube, Sunita Singhvi, GMATWiz, verbal. All right, I hope I have answered all your queries. I'll give you one example, Avik. One of my students recently took the Focus edition, all right, and she scored a 625 in the Focus edition, which is equivalent to 700 in the Classic edition. All right, so the Classic edition scoring is higher than the Focus edition. So 710 in Classic edition will be somewhere around 640 on the Focus edition. My email is Sunita Singhvi77@gmail.com. Hold on. I'll just type that. I don't know about the audibility, KP. I guess. All right, everybody. So, KP, I think all clear. Avik, I hope I have answered your query. KP, I haven't got enough data to tell you about that. Honestly, if you ask me, I haven't got enough data. Students are still in the process of taking the Focus edition. All right. The one data point that I had very recently, I could give you. So thank you, guys. Wishing all of you all the best for the exam. And yes, take care. Make sure that you improve on your skills, especially reading and comprehension and CRR2, both will require the same skills, the skills of reading properly. So take care, happy learning, goodbye, good day if you're just starting your day, and a good night if it's the day's end for you. Bye-bye. KP, I don't know in what way you mean way ahead of Classic GMAT. They are two different, let's say, formats, okay? Some lot of changes made to the Classic edition. So what is way ahead and behind, that's not the right way to view it. It's just that what works for you and what doesn't work for you. If sentence correction is a very weak area for you and you don't have enough time to bring up that area within the 31st January, then it's better you take the Focus edition. Focus edition, definitely the weightage of quantitative skills is higher there. So they're two different formats. Okay, take care. Bye bye, everybody.